The crash of shattering porcelain echoed through the marble hallway, followed immediately by a crack that Sophia would remember for the rest of her life. The sound of her own arm breaking. She didn't scream. Couldn't. The shock stole her breath as she crumpled against the kitchen island, cradling her left arm while expensive china fragments scattered across the floor like fallen stars. Through the haze of pain, she heard Marcus Volkov's nephew laugh. Actually laugh, as he stepped over the mess he'd created when he'd shoved her backward into the counter. "Clean it up," Derek sneered, his words slurred from the whiskey he'd been drinking since noon. "That's what my uncle pays you for, isn't it? To clean up messes?" Sophia bit down on her lip hard enough to taste copper, willing herself not to cry in front of him. Not this time. She'd worked in the Volkov estate for 8 months, and in that time, she'd learned to make herself invisible whenever Derek visited. But today, she'd made a mistake. She'd told him no when he'd cornered her in the wine cellar, his intentions written plainly across his flushed face. The rejection had enraged him. He'd grabbed her wrist, twisted it, demanded to know who she thought she was to refuse him. When she'd pulled away and run for the kitchen, he'd followed. And when she'd reached for her phone to call security, he'd swept his arm across the counter, sending the tea service she'd just arranged crashing down. She'd stumbled backward, and then the pain was making her dizzy now. She could feel her arm swelling, the wrongness of it making her stomach turn. "I said clean it up." Derek moved closer, and Sophia instinctively drew back. Her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. "I need to go to the hospital," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please. You need to learn your place." He grabbed her good arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You think you're special because my uncle doesn't fire you? You're just the help. You're nothing." The sound of the front door opening made them both freeze. Derek's grip loosened slightly, and Sophia felt her heart leap into her throat. It was Tuesday. Marcus Volkov wasn't supposed to be home until Thursday. He was in Prague on business. He was... Derek. The single word, spoken in a voice like winter itself, cut through the kitchen with surgical precision. Sophia had heard Marcus Volkov speak exactly 4 times in 8 months. Once when he'd hired her after Mrs. Chen retired. Once when he'd asked if she took sugar in her coffee. She'd been so startled by the question that she'd spilled water on the counter. Once when he'd told her that her cooking reminded him of his mother's, and she could have sworn she saw something almost human flicker in those steel-gray eyes. And once when he'd found her crying in the library after her sister called to say she couldn't afford her daughter's medication, and he'd simply asked, "How much?" He'd transferred $20,000 to her account that night. She'd tried to refuse, tried to tell him she'd pay it back, but he'd looked at her with those unreadable eyes and said, "You work for me. What's mine protects what's mine." She hadn't understood what he meant then. Now, watching him step into the kitchen, she thought she might be beginning to. Marcus Volkov was not a large man, just under 6 feet, lean with the kind of understated presence that made people nervous without quite knowing why. He wore his dark suits like armor and his silence like a weapon. At 48, he had silver threading through his black hair and lines around his eyes that came from seeing too much, too young. He looked at Sophia first. His gaze traveled from her tear-stained face to her twisted posture, to the arm she held against her chest, to the broken china on the floor. Something flickered in his expression. There and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Then he looked at his nephew. Derek dropped Sophia's arm and stepped back, suddenly looking much younger than his 26 years. "Uncle Marcus." "I didn't know you were coming back early." "Clearly." Marcus set his briefcase down with deliberate care. "Sophia, who did this to you?" The question was asked quietly, almost gently. But Sophia felt the weight behind it, the promise of something vast and terrible held in check. "I fell," she heard herself say. The lie tasted like ash. "The dishes. I was clumsy. Look at me." She did. She couldn't help it. Those gray eyes pinned her in place. "Who did this?" A tear finally escaped, trailing down her cheek. She saw Marcus's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "It was an accident," Derek interjected, his voice too loud, too bright. "She was rushing around, not paying attention. I wasn't asking you." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Sophia, you have 5 seconds to tell me the truth, or I will make you tell me the truth, and you won't like my methods any better than whatever you're afraid of." Her voice cracked. "Derek, he pushed me. I said no, and he—" "That's a lie!" Derek's face flushed crimson. "She's making it up because she wants attention, because—" The sound of Marcus drawing his gun was somehow both soft and deafening. He didn't point it at anyone. Simply held it loosely at his side, checking the chamber with the casual ease of long practice. "Get out of my house," Marcus said to Derek. Still that same quiet tone. "If I see you here again, I will forget that my sister asked me to look after you. Do you understand?" Derek's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. He looked at Sophia like he wanted to say something cutting, something that would put her back in her place. But the words died under his uncle's stare. He turned and practically ran for the door. The silence he left behind was thick enough to choke on. Marcus holstered his gun and crossed to Sophia in 3 strides. Up close, she could smell cedar and gunpowder, could see the thin scar that ran from his temple to his jawline. He studied her arm with a clinical intensity that made her shiver. "Hospital," he said. "Now." "Mr. Volkov, I can drive myself. You can't drive with that arm." He was already pulling out his phone, already dialing. "Victor, bring the car around. We're going to Presbyterian." A pause. "Yes, now." "I'm so sorry," Sophia whispered. "The tea service, it was— I don't care about the tea service." For the first time, something like anger colored his voice. "I care that someone in my house felt entitled to put his hands on you." He shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it carefully over her shoulders. It smelled like him, warm and cedar dark, and Sophia felt something inside her chest crack open just a little. "Can you walk?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then walk. I need to make a phone call." As Victor pulled the sleek black car around, Sophia stood in the foyer, dizzy with pain and shock and something else she couldn't name. Behind her, she heard Marcus speaking in rapid Russian, his voice soft and deadly. She only caught a few words. Her Russian was rudimentary at best, but she understood names. Derek, and 7 others. By morning, she thought, remembering the cold promise in Marcus's eyes, something irrevocable would have happened. She just didn't know yet how irrevocable it would be. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and concerned faces, and a doctor who kept asking if she felt safe at home. Sophia said yes, because Marcus was standing in the corner of the exam room like a shadow, and somehow, impossibly, it was the truth. They set her arm, a clean fracture of the radius, the doctor said, consistent with impact against a hard surface, and wrapped it in a cast that seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. They gave her pain medication that made the edges of the world soft and strange. Through it all, Marcus stayed. He didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't use his phone or show any sign of impatience. Simply stood there, a silent sentinel, and when the billing department tried to give Sophia forms to fill out, he intercepted them with a black credit card and a look that suggested they should never bring it up again. It was nearly midnight when Victor drove them back to the estate. Sophia was half asleep from the medication, her head resting against the cool window, when she felt Marcus's jacket slip from her shoulders. She started to protest, but he was already settling it more securely around her, his movements surprisingly gentle. "Sleep," he said. "I'll wake you when we're home." Home. The word lodged somewhere in her chest. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Victor was opening her door and Marcus was saying her name. She blinked up at him, disoriented, and he sighed. "Can you walk?" "Yes, But when she tried to stand, her legs buckled. The medication, the shock, the sheer exhaustion of the day, it all caught up with her at once. Marcus caught her before she could fall. For a moment he seemed to debate something internally. Then, with a muttered curse in Russian, he simply lifted her into his arms. "Mr. Volkov!" Sophia's face flamed. "I can walk. I don't need—" "You clearly do need." He carried her toward the house as though she weighed nothing, as though this were perfectly normal. "Victor, make sure the house is locked down. No one gets in without my authorization." "Yes, sir." Inside, Marcus navigated the dark hallways with ease, and Sophia realized with a start that he wasn't taking her to the staff quarters on the ground floor. He was climbing the stairs to the second floor, to the wing where his private rooms were. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere I can keep an eye on you." He nudged open a door with his shoulder, and Sophia found herself in a bedroom that was twice the size of her entire apartment. It was decorated in shades of gray and navy, masculine and spare, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the gardens. Marcus set her down on the bed with care that felt almost reverent, then stepped back as if burned. "I'll have Mrs. Adelaide bring you something to sleep in," he said. "She'll stay with you tonight." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." He ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its perfect order. For the first time since she'd known him, Marcus Volkov looked almost uncertain. "I should have known. I should have seen that you weren't safe." "How could you have known?" "You weren't even here." "That's the problem." His voice dropped to something raw and dark. "I leave for 2 days and this happens. What if it had been worse? What if he'd—" He cut himself off, jaw working. Sophia stared at him. "Why do you care?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes, she saw something vast and complicated and frighteningly intense. "Ask me again in the morning," he said finally, "when you're not half asleep on painkillers." He left before she could respond, but she heard him on the other side of the door, speaking to someone in low, urgent tones, making arrangements, making sure she was protected, making sure she realized that Derek would never have the chance to hurt anyone again. Sophia woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the pain in her arm reminded her, and the previous day came crashing back. She sat up carefully, finding herself dressed in silk pajamas that were far too large, Marcus's, she realized with a jolt, and there was a note on the nightstand in elegant handwriting. "The coffee is fresh. I need to speak with you when you're ready. Take your time. M." The coffee was indeed fresh, along with a full breakfast spread on a tray by the window. Sophia ate mechanically, her mind racing. What had happened after she fell asleep? What had Marcus done? She found him in his study an hour later, showered and dressed in fresh clothes from her own room, her arm aching, but manageable. He was on the phone, speaking in clipped Russian, but ended the call the moment he saw her. "Sit." He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. "Please." Sophia sat. Marcus leaned back, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. He looked tired, she realized, like he hadn't slept. "Derek won't bother you again," he said without preamble. "Neither will the 7 friends he called last night when he left here. They were planning to come back, to teach you a lesson for getting Derek in trouble with his uncle." His voice was utterly flat. "They won't be doing that." Sophia's blood ran cold. "What did you do?" "What I do best." He stood, crossing to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "I removed threats. Derek is currently on a cargo ship to Singapore. He won't be returning to the United States. The others—" He paused. "Let's just say they've learned that certain actions have consequences. Are they—" She couldn't finish the question. "Alive? Yes. Intact? That depends on your definition." He turned to look at her. "I don't kill unnecessarily, Sophia, but I do protect what's mine." There it was again, that phrase. What's mine? "I'm your employee," Sophia said carefully. "That's all." Something flickered in Marcus's expression. Something almost like pain. "Is it?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning she didn't dare examine. I don't understand, she whispered. Marcus crossed back to his desk but didn't sit. Instead, he braced his hands on the polished wood and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. 8 months ago, Mrs. Chen told me she was retiring. She also told me she'd found me a replacement, a young woman who'd lost her parents, who was working 3 jobs to support her sister and her sister's child, who was kind and careful and deserving of better. Those were her exact words. He smiled slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Chen was never one for sentiment, so when she said that, I paid attention. Sophia's heart was hammering now. You walked into my house wearing a dress 2 sizes too big and shoes with holes in them, and you looked at me like you expected me to dismiss you on sight. Do you remember what you said when I asked why you wanted the job? She did. She'd said, because I need it, and because I'll work harder than anyone you could hire. You've kept that promise, Marcus continued. Every day. You work yourself to exhaustion, you never complain, and you try so hard to be invisible that sometimes I think you're trying to disappear entirely. His voice softened. But I see you, Sophia. I've seen you from the first day. Mr. Volkov. Marcus. My name is Marcus. Marcus. The name felt strange on her tongue. Intimate. I don't know what you're saying. I'm saying that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you for 8 months. I'm saying that I cut my trip short because I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, couldn't function knowing you were here and I was there. I'm saying that when I saw you yesterday, saw what he'd done to you, something in me broke. He straightened, his hands curling into fists. I'm saying that I want you to stay, not as my employee, as something more. The world tilted sideways. You don't mean that, Sophia said, but her voice was shaking. You can't mean that. I've killed men for less than looking at me the wrong way. I've built an empire on blood and fear and calculated violence. I don't say things I don't mean. He moved around the desk, slow and deliberate, giving her time to run if she wanted to. I'm not a good man, Sophia. I'm probably not even a decent man. But I would burn this city down before I let anyone hurt you again. He stopped a foot away from her, close enough that she could see the silver in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. Tell me I'm wrong, that you don't feel this thing between us, and I'll never mention it again. You can work here or leave. I'll give you enough money to start over anywhere you want. But tell me the truth. Sophia couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything in her life had taught her to be cautious, to protect herself, to expect the worst. But when she looked at Marcus, really looked at him, she saw something she'd never expected to find. She saw someone who was just as lonely as she was. I'm afraid, she whispered. Of me? Of this. Of what it means. You live in a different world. I'm nobody. I have nothing. You have everything. His hand lifted slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he cupped her face with a gentleness that made her throat tight. You have kindness in a world that tried to beat it out of you. You have strength that doesn't require violence. You have a capacity for hope that I lost decades ago. His thumb brushed her cheek. Don't you understand, Sophia? You're not the one who's nobody. I am. Without you, I'm just a man with blood on his hands and ice in his chest. That's not true. Then prove it. Stay with me. Not as my maid, as my partner, my equal. His voice dropped to a near whisper. As the woman I would give everything to protect. Sophia felt the tears coming and couldn't stop them. What if this is a mistake? What if... Then we'll make it together. Marcus's other hand came up, cradling her face like she was something precious, something that might break. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm not asking you to trust me completely. I'm just asking you to give us a chance. She should say no. She should be smart, practical, careful. She should remember that this was Marcus Volkov, a man whose name made other men pale, whose reputation was built on fear. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw a man who'd carried her when she couldn't walk, who'd sat with her in a hospital room for hours, who'd made 8 men disappear because they'd threatened her. Who was looking at her now, like she held the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life? "One chance," she heard herself say, "but I have conditions." Something like hope flickered in his expression. "Name them." "I want to keep working. Not as a maid. I'll find something else, something that's mine. I won't be dependent on you." "Agreed." "I want time. I want us to do this right. To actually get to know each other without the power imbalance." "Agreed." "And," she took a shaky breath, "and you have to promise me that if this doesn't work, if we realize we made a mistake, we can walk away without anyone getting hurt." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I can promise that I'll never hurt you. I can promise that I'll respect whatever choice you make. But I can't promise to walk away without getting hurt, because I'm already too far gone for that." It was the honesty that did it. The raw vulnerability in his voice that told her this was as terrifying for him as it was for her. Sophia reached up with her good hand and covered his where it rested against her cheek. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Yes." The kiss happened so slowly that she saw it coming from miles away. Marcus leaned in with infinite care, his eyes never leaving hers, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When his lips finally met hers, it was soft, questioning, almost reverent. And Sophia, who'd spent her whole life bracing for the next disaster, let herself fall. 3 months later, Sophia stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the emerald necklace Marcus had given her the night before. It matched her dress, a deep green silk that made her feel like someone from a different life, someone who belonged in ballrooms and galleries instead of scrubbing floors. "Are you ready?" Marcus appeared in the doorway, devastating in a black tux. "We can still cancel if you're not comfortable." "And miss the gala you've been planning for months?" "Not a chance." It was the Foundation's annual fundraiser, the charity Marcus had started in his mother's name, dedicated to helping women escape dangerous situations. Sophia had suggested expanding the mission to include job training and housing assistance, and Marcus had not only agreed, but had made her the director of the new programs. "I'm incredibly proud of you, you know," she said, crossing to him. "What you've built with the Foundation. It's remarkable." "What we've built." He pulled her close, careful of her arm, which was finally out of the cast. "I never cared about any of it until you showed me what it could mean. What it should mean." Over the past 3 months, Sophia had learned things about Marcus that would have seemed impossible that first day. She'd learned that he collected first-edition poetry books and read them when he couldn't sleep. That he was teaching himself to paint because it was the one thing he'd never been able to control. That he called his mother's grave every Sunday and left fresh flowers, even when he was traveling. She'd learned that beneath the ice and steel was someone who felt everything too deeply and had learned to bury it so far down that even he couldn't find it anymore. Until now. Until her. "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus said as they headed for the car. "Before we get there. Before we're in public and I can't say this properly." Sophia's stomach flipped. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. I hope it's not." He helped her into the car, then slid in beside her, taking her hand. "The Foundation Board meeting is next week. They're going to ask me to step down as president and take an advisory role instead." "What? Why?" "Because I'm recommending you as my replacement." Sophia's mouth fell open. "Marcus, I can't. I've only been doing this for 3 months. And you've already accomplished more than I did in 5 years. You understand what these programs need because you've lived it. The board knows it. I know it." He brought her hand to his lips. "Besides, I have other priorities now." "Such as?" "Such as figuring out how to convince the woman I love that she should marry me." The world stopped. "You... what?" Marcus smiled and it transformed his face, made him look younger and almost carefree. "I love you, Sophia. I think I've loved you since the day you spilled water on my counter and looked at me like you expected lightning to strike. I'm not asking you now. I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I wanted you to know. Before we walk into that gala, and everyone sees us together, I wanted you to know that this isn't casual for me, that you're not casual for me. Sophia felt tears prickling her eyes. I love you, too, she whispered. I think I've been terrified to admit it because it feels too big, too much, too perfect? Impossible. Nothing this good is supposed to happen to people like me. Marcus framed her face with his hands, his expression fierce. People like you, people who are brave and kind and strong, deserve everything good in this world, and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. The kiss was different this time, deeper, full of promise and heat and the kind of certainty that came from knowing you'd found the person who saw all of you and chose you anyway. When they pulled apart, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. So when I do ask you properly, and I will, probably when you least expect it, what are you going to say? Sophia pretended to consider it. I guess you'll have to wait and find out. You're going to make me work for it. Is that a problem? Never. His smile was pure happiness. You're worth working for. The gala was everything Sophia had imagined, and more. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, champagne towers, and a guest list that read like a who's who of the city's elite. As Marcus guided her through the crowd, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back, she felt eyes following them. Whispers starting and stopping. Marcus Volkov, the untouchable, the feared, the man no one quite understood, with a woman on his arm. With Sophia, who 3 months ago had been wearing a too large dress and scrubbing his floors. Ignore them, Marcus murmured in her ear. They're just jealous. Of what? Of me, for having you. Of you, for somehow managing to make me human again. They made the rounds, donors, board members, city officials who clearly had no idea what to make of Marcus's sudden involvement in philanthropy. Sophia fielded questions about the new programs with growing confidence, and every time she looked up, Marcus was watching her with something like wonder in his eyes. It was during dinner, right before the speeches were set to begin, that someone approached their table. A woman in her 60s, elegant in navy silk, with kind eyes and a familiar face. Mrs. Chen! Sophia stood, then froze, uncertain of the protocol. The older woman pulled her into a hug. Oh, my dear girl. Look at you. She held Sophia at arm's length, beaming. I knew it. I told Marcus you were special. You did more than that, Marcus said, standing to kiss Mrs. Chen's cheek. You saved my life. Nonsense. I simply introduced two people who needed each other. She winked at Sophia. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect it to happen quite this dramatically. Broken arms and vanishing nephews. You always did have a flair for the theatrical, Marcus. Sophia couldn't help laughing. You knew? You knew that he'd been half in love with the idea of you before you even walked through the door? Of course I knew. I've known Marcus since he was 16 years old. I know when he's pretending not to care. Mrs. Chen patted Sophia's hand. I also knew you'd be good for him, that you'd see past all the walls he's built. I didn't... Sophia glanced at Marcus, who looked almost embarrassed. I didn't know you two were that close. Mrs. Chen was my mother's best friend, Marcus explained. After she died, Mrs. Chen? I made sure this stubborn boy didn't completely wall himself off from the world, Mrs. Chen finished. Though I'll admit, I'd nearly given up hope. Until you. The speeches began before Sophia could respond, but she felt the weight of Mrs. Chen's words settling over her. The understanding that this, what she and Marcus had found, was something people had been hoping for, waiting for, something that might actually be as real and right as it felt. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he took the stage with his usual cool composure. But when he looked out at the crowd, his eyes found Sophia immediately. 3 months ago, he began, someone asked me why I started this foundation, what I hoped to accomplish. At the time, I gave the standard answer. something about honoring my mother's memory, about giving back to the community. And those things were true, but they weren't the whole truth. He paused, and Sophia felt her heart start to race. The truth is, I started this foundation because I was angry. Angry at a world that takes vulnerable people and breaks them. Angry at systems that fail the people who need them most. Angry at myself for not doing more. Sooner. His gaze never left Sophia's. But anger isn't sustainable. Anger burns hot and fast and leaves nothing but ash. What sustains us, what makes change possible, is something far more powerful. It's hope. It's compassion. It's the belief that people deserve second chances, fresh starts, and someone willing to fight for them. He smiled slightly. Someone recently taught me that. Someone who's lived through the worst this world has to offer and still manages to see the best in people. Someone who's shown me that strength doesn't require walls, that kindness isn't weakness, and that it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Sophia felt tears spilling down her cheeks. So tonight I'm announcing that I'm stepping down as president of the foundation. But I'm not going far. I'll be staying on as an advisor. The new president, effective immediately, is Sofia Castellano, who will be leading us into the next phase of our mission. A phase that focuses not just on escape, but on building new lives. On turning survivors into thrivers. On making sure that no one falls through the cracks. The applause was thunderous, but Sophia barely heard it. All she could see was Marcus, making his way back to her, his eyes shining with pride and love and something that looked a lot like relief. When he reached her, he held out his hand. "Dance with me?" "Marcus, everyone's watching." "I know. I want them to." He pulled her close as the music started, swaying gently. "I want everyone in this city to know that you're mine and I'm yours. That this isn't some secret or scandal. This is real. This is everything." Sophia rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the fabric of his tux. "When you said you'd ask me properly. When you ask me properly. Yes?" "The answer is yes. It's been yes since the moment you carried me up those stairs and looked at me like I mattered." Marcus's arms tightened around her. "You do matter. You matter more than anything else in my life. I know, that's the terrifying part, but it's also the wonderful part." He pulled back just enough to look at her, and Sophia saw her whole future written in his eyes. Challenges, yes. His world was dangerous, complicated, sometimes dark. But there would also be this, these moments of perfect understanding, of being seen and chosen and loved without reservation. "So when I ask," Marcus said softly, "when I find the perfect moment and the perfect words." "You don't need perfect words. You just need to ask." Something shifted in his expression. He glanced around the ballroom at the hundreds of people watching them, and Sophia saw the moment he made the decision. "Sofia Castellano," he said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Will you marry me?" The music stuttered to a stop. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in the room turned to them. Sophia started laughing through her tears. "Now? You're asking me now? In front of everyone? I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of pretending that what I feel for you is anything less than consuming." He cupped her face, thumb brushing away her tears. "So yes, now, in front of everyone. Because I want the whole world to know that I'm asking the woman I love to be my wife. To be my partner in everything. To be the person who reminds me every day that I'm more than the sum of my worst decisions." "You absolute madman!" Sophia whispered. But she was smiling, her whole face lit up with joy. "Yes. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." The kiss that followed was witnessed by 300 people and photographed by at least 6 phones that Sophia could see. It would be on social media within minutes, in the papers by morning. Marcus Volkov, notorious and untouchable, publicly claiming Sofia Castellano as his future wife. When they finally broke apart, the applause was deafening. But Sofia barely noticed. She was too busy staring at the man who'd found her with a broken arm and somehow mended her broken heart instead. "I love you," she said, and this time there was no fear in it, only certainty. "I love you," Marcus replied, "and I will protect you, support you, and choose you every day for the rest of our lives. That's a promise." Later, as they left the gala amid a shower of congratulations and champagne toasts, Sofia thought about the girl she'd been 8 months ago. Scared, alone, expecting nothing good. She thought about Derek and the 7 men who'd tried to hurt her, all of them scattered now to places where they could never touch her again. She thought about the moment her arm had broken, and how it had broken her life wide open into something she never could have imagined. And she thought about Marcus, who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and had responded not with pity, but with protection. Not with possession, but with partnership. Who'd given her a foundation to run, a home to share, and a love that felt like finally coming in from the cold. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked as they drove through the city streets, her hand clasped in his. "About broken arms and vanished men," Sofia said with a smile. "About the worst day of my life turning into the best thing that ever happened to me. The universe has a strange sense of humor. Or maybe," Sofia said, leaning her head on his shoulder, "maybe some things have to break before they can be rebuilt into something stronger." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "Maybe you're right." "Of course I'm right. I'm always right. You should probably get used to that." His laugh was warm and genuine, the kind of laugh she suspected he hadn't made in years before meeting her. "Yes, ma'am, I'll work on it." As they pulled up to the estate, their estate now, the place where everything had changed, Sofia felt a bone-deep certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Marcus Volkov, the man with ice in his veins and blood on his hands, and Sofia Castellano, the woman who'd taught him how to be warm again. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no glass slippers or magic spells. Just 2 broken people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment and decided that they were tired of being broken alone. 8 men had vanished that night, but 2 people had found each other, and in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The wedding was set for May, a spring ceremony in the estate gardens with white roses, and Sofia's niece as flower girl. They'd hired planners, sent invitations to over 200 guests, and Sofia had found a dress that made her feel like she was floating. Everything was perfect, which was exactly when Sofia should have known something would go wrong. It started with a phone call at 3 a.m, 6 weeks before the wedding. Sofia woke to Marcus already out of bed, his voice low and tense as he spoke rapid-fire Russian in the hallway. She caught only fragments, something about shipments, something about the Kozlov family, something about a deal gone wrong. When he came back to bed an hour later, his face was carefully blank, in a way she'd learned to recognize. The way he looked when he was trying to protect her from something. "Marcus." She sat up, switching on the bedside lamp. "What's happening?" "Nothing you need to worry about." He kissed her forehead, but it felt perfunctory, distant. "Go back to sleep. Don't do that. Don't shut me out." He was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally looked at her, she saw something like fear in his eyes. "There's a problem with one of my business associates. Victor's handling it. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus became someone she barely recognized, constantly on the phone, constantly tense, sleeping 3 hours a night if he slept at all. He still kissed her goodbye every morning, still asked about her day, still held her at night. But part of him was somewhere else, somewhere dark, and he wouldn't let her follow. Sofia tried to be patient. She knew Marcus's world had complications she couldn't fully understand. But when she found him in his study at 2 a.m, staring at security footage with Victor, both of them looking grim, her patience snapped. "Tell me what's going on," she demanded, closing the study door behind her. "Right now, because whatever this is, it's affecting us. It's affecting our future. and I'm not going to stand here and pretend I don't notice." Marcus and Victor exchanged a look. Then Victor quietly excused himself, leaving them alone. "Sit down," Marcus said, and the heaviness in his voice made her stomach drop. She sat. "5 years ago, I did business with a man named Alexei Kozlov. Arms dealing, primarily. It was lucrative, but Alexei was unpredictable. Violent. He had a tendency to eliminate partners who he felt had outlived their usefulness." Marcus poured himself a drink, his hand steady but his jaw tight. "I ended our partnership before he could end me. It cost me a significant amount of money and several contacts, but I got out clean, or so I thought. What does this have to do with now? Alexei's son, Roman, has taken over the family business, and apparently he holds grudges better than his father did." Marcus took a long drink. 3 weeks ago, one of my shipping containers was intercepted. Inside were documents, fabricated documents, that made it look like I've been informing to federal authorities, giving up information on other families in exchange for immunity. Sophia's blood went cold. "But you haven't." "Of course I haven't. But in my world, the accusation is almost as dangerous as the act. Roman's made sure these documents have circulated to every major player from here to Moscow. And now," he set down his glass with deliberate care, "now I have a target on my back. Multiple targets, actually, from people who believe I've betrayed them." "Can't you prove the documents are fake?" "I'm trying, but that takes time. And time is something I don't have much of." He finally looked at her, and the raw fear in his eyes made her chest constrict. "Sophia, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I've arranged for you to stay with Mrs. Chen for a few weeks, just until this is resolved." "Absolutely not. This isn't negotiable. You're right, it's not." Sophia stood, crossing to him. "Because I'm not leaving you. We're in this together, remember? For better or worse. And we're not even married yet, so the worse is coming early. This isn't a joke." Marcus grabbed her shoulders, his grip almost painful. "These people don't play games, Sophia. If they think they can use you to get to me, they will. If they think hurting you will send a message, they won't hesitate. I cannot—" His voice cracked. "I cannot lose you. I won't survive it." Sophia cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "Then we make sure they can't get to me. We increase security. We're careful. But I am not running away and leaving you to face this alone. You're impossible. I'm yours. That's what you said, isn't it? What's mine protects what's mine." She pressed her forehead to his. "Well, you're mine too, Marcus Volkov. And I protect what's mine." He pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair. "I don't deserve you. Good thing I don't care about deserve. I care about love, and I love you too much to watch you fight this battle alone." What Sophia didn't tell him, what she couldn't bring herself to say, was that she'd already started making her own plans. Because if Roman Kozlov wanted to spread lies about Marcus, then someone needed to find the truth, and Sophia had spent enough time managing the Foundation to know people who owed Marcus favors. People who might be willing to help. The next morning, while Marcus was locked in meetings with his security team, Sophia made a call to Daniel Park, an investigative journalist who'd covered the Foundation's work extensively. She'd helped his sister get into one of their housing programs 6 months ago, and he'd told her if she ever needed anything at all, to let him know. "I need you to dig into someone for me," she said when he answered. "Roman Kozlov. Everything you can find. Business dealings, associations, enemies. Especially anything that might prove he fabricated federal documents." There was a pause. Then, "Sophia, do you understand how dangerous that is? Kozlov isn't someone you investigate lightly. I understand. I also understand that he's trying to destroy someone I love. And I'm not going to sit back and let it happen." Daniel sighed. "You sound like Marcus. Fine, I'll look into it. But you need to be careful. If Kozlov finds out, he won't. And Daniel, thank you." She hung up before he could argue further, and immediately called her next contact. a forensic accountant named Jennifer Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, who'd helped the foundation audit several partner organizations. If anyone could trace money trails and find proof of fabrication, it was Jennifer. By the end of the day, Sophia had quietly assembled a team of 5 people, all of whom owed either her or Marcus some kind of debt. People who were willing to work off the books, to dig into corners that law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't touch. She didn't tell Marcus. She knew he'd forbid it, knew he'd see it as putting herself in danger. But Sophia had learned something important over the past months. Sometimes love meant protecting the person you loved from themselves. And Marcus, for all his strength and ruthlessness, had one fatal weakness: her. If he spent all his energy trying to keep her safe, he wouldn't be thinking clearly enough to clear his name. So Sophia would clear it for him. And she'd do it quietly enough that he'd never know until it was done. 2 days later, Daniel called back. "I found something," he said without preamble. Roman Kozlov has a financial advisor named Thomas Brennan. American, former CPA, got disbarred for forging client documents 5 years ago. He's been working for Kozlov ever since, probably doing exactly the kind of document fabrication you're looking for. Sophia's heart leaped. "Can you prove it?" "Not yet. But Jennifer's looking at some offshore accounts that might tie back to payments for the fabrication. If we can connect those payments to Brennan, and then to the documents about Marcus, we can prove they're fake." "Exactly. But Sophia, this is going to take time. Maybe a week, maybe more. And you need to be prepared for the possibility that Kozlov has covered his tracks too well." "He hasn't." Sophia was surprised by the certainty in her own voice. "Men like Kozlov get arrogant. They think they're untouchable. That's going to be his mistake." She was right. 3 days later, Jennifer called with the breakthrough they needed, a series of wire transfers from one of Kozlov's shell companies to Brennan's account, dated exactly 1 week before the fabricated documents surfaced. The amounts matched perfectly with what someone would pay for high-level document forgery, but the real gift came from an unexpected source. One of Marcus's former associates, a man named Pavel, who'd been accused of working with Marcus as an informant, reached out through Victor. He had copies of the original unfabricated shipping documents, proof that someone had altered them after the fact. "Why would he help?" Sophia asked Marcus when Victor brought the news. "If he thinks you informed on him, because Pavel's smart enough to know I'd never be stupid enough to leave evidence," Marcus said. His eyes were calculating now, the fear replaced by something sharper. "He's hedging his bets. If I can prove I'm innocent, he wants to be on the right side of this. Does it matter why he's helping?" "We have what we need." Marcus pulled her close, studying her face. "You've been very calm about all of this, almost like you expected good news." Sophia's heart skipped. "I have faith in you." "No." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You have something else. What did you do, Sophia?" There was no point in lying. Marcus could read her too well. "I hired some people to investigate Kozlov," she admitted. "A journalist, a forensic accountant, a few others. They've been working on proving the documents were fabricated." The silence that followed was deafening. "You did what?" Marcus's voice was very, very quiet. "I did what needed to be done. You were so focused on protecting me that you weren't thinking clearly. Someone had to put themselves directly in the crosshairs of one of the most dangerous men on the East Coast." Marcus's hands were shaking now, actually shaking. "Sophia, do you have any idea what could have happened if Kozlov found out? What he would have done to you? The same things he would do to you. The same things he's threatening to do anyway. At least this way, we're fighting back." "We? There is no we in this, Sophia. This is my world. My problem, Your fight?" Sophia pulled away from him, her own anger rising. "Is that what you were going to say? Because I thought we were partners, Marcus. I thought we were building a life together. But apparently that only applies when things are easy. When things get dangerous. You want to lock me away like some princess in a tower while you fight the dragon alone. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've been shutting me out for 3 weeks, making decisions about my safety without consulting me. Trying to send me away. Did it ever occur to you that I might be able to help? That I might have resources you don't?" Marcus stared at her. Then, slowly, he sat down on the edge of his desk, scrubbing a hand over his face. "You're right," he said finally, and Sophia nearly fell over from shock. "I have been shutting you out. I've been so terrified of losing you that I forgot you're not some fragile thing that needs to be protected. You're the woman who survived everything life threw at her and came out stronger. The woman who built a foundation into something that actually matters. The woman who's apparently brave enough, or crazy enough, to go after Roman Kozlov with a journalist and an accountant." Despite everything, Sophia felt herself smile. When you put it that way, it does sound a little crazy. It sounds like something I would do. He reached for her hand, pulling her between his knees. "Tell me everything. What did you find?" She did. Told him about Daniel and Jennifer, about the wire transfers, and Brennan and all the pieces they'd assembled. With each revelation, Marcus's expression shifted from anger to surprise to something like grudging admiration. "You built a case," he said when she finished. "In less than a week, you built a better case than my entire security team. Your security team was focused on keeping you alive. I was focused on clearing your name." Sophia ran her fingers through his hair. "We make a good team when you actually let me be part of it." "I know. I'm sorry. The thought of something happening to you is the same as the thought of something happening to you, for me. So we're going to stop trying to protect each other from everything and start trusting each other to be smart about the risks we take." She tilted his chin up. "Deal?" "Deal." He pulled her down for a kiss that tasted like relief and promise, and the kind of love that didn't try to wrap you in cotton wool. "Now, let's figure out how to use what you found to bury Roman Kozlov." It took another week to assemble all the pieces. Victor worked with Daniel to verify every source, every document, every connection. Jennifer and her team traced the money through so many shell companies that Sophia's head spun just hearing about it, and Pavel, true to form, provided testimony that corroborated everything they'd found. The final step was a meeting. Marcus, Roman Kozlov, and representatives from 3 other major families, all of whom had received the fabricated documents. A neutral location, plenty of witnesses, and a very clear presentation of evidence. Sophia wasn't supposed to be there. The meeting was being held in a private club that didn't allow +1s, and Marcus had made her promise to stay at the estate with Victor's security team. She'd agreed. She'd also never been very good at keeping promises that didn't make sense, which was why she was sitting in the back of Marcus's car, hidden under a blanket in the back seat, when he pulled up to the club. "Sophia?" Marcus's voice was resigned when he opened the back door and found her there. "I should have known. You should have." She climbed out, smoothing her dress. "And you should also know that I'm not trying to undermine you. I'm trying to support you. There's a difference." "There is. Though I'm not sure what the difference is when you're hiding in my car like a teenager sneaking out. The difference is that I'm doing it because I love you, and I believe in you, not because I don't trust your judgment." She straightened his tie, which didn't need straightening. "I'll stay in the background. I won't say a word unless you need me to. But I'm not letting you walk into this alone." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he took her hand and laced their fingers together. "Then I guess we're doing this together." The meeting room was all dark wood and leather, the kind of place where men made deals that affected thousands of lives without ever raising their voices. Roman Kozlov was already there, younger than Sophia expected, maybe 35, with cold blue eyes and the kind of smile that never reached them. He looked at Sophia like she was a curious insect, then dismissed her entirely. That, Sophia thought, was going to be his second mistake. Marcus presented his case methodically, professionally, with Victor providing backup documentation. The wire transfers, the altered documents, Brennan's history of fabrication, Pavel's testimony. It was airtight, undeniable, and by the time Marcus finished, the representatives from the other families were looking at Kozlov with expressions that ranged from anger to disgust. "Interesting story," Roman said when the silence had stretched too long. But you have no proof that I ordered any of this. Brennan could have been acting independently. He could have, Sophia said, speaking for the first time. Every head in the room turned to her. Except that you bragged about it. Roman's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? 2 months ago, at a charity gala in Boston, you told 3 different people that you were going to make Marcus Volkov pay for what his family did to yours. She pulled out her phone, pulling up a recording that Daniel had tracked down after days of investigating. Would you like to hear the recording? Or should I just play it for everyone here? The color drained from Roman's face. Sophia pressed play. Roman's voice filled the room, drunk and boastful, talking about how he'd found the perfect way to destroy Marcus Volkov's reputation. How he'd hired someone to fabricate evidence. How, by the time Marcus figured out what was happening, it would be too late. The silence that followed was absolute. You recorded me, Roman said finally, his voice shaking with rage. I didn't. But someone at that gala did, and they were happy to share it with a journalist friend of mine when he started asking questions. Sophia pocketed her phone. The problem with bragging, Mr. Kozlov, is that someone is always listening. One of the family representatives stood. This meeting is over. Kozlov, you have 48 hours to leave the eastern seaboard. If you're still here after that, we'll consider it a declaration of war. Roman looked like he wanted to argue, but the other representatives were already standing, their expressions making it clear that arguing would be a very bad idea. He shot Marcus and Sophia one last venomous look, then stormed out. As the room cleared, Marcus turned to Sophia with an expression of pure disbelief. You recorded him? Daniel recorded him. Or rather, Daniel found someone who recorded him, she grinned. Turns out Roman Kozlov is not nearly as smart as he thinks he is. Marcus laughed, actually laughed, the kind of deep, genuine laugh she'd only heard from him a handful of times. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her in front of everyone still in the room. Propriety be damned. You are terrifying, he murmured against her lips. Absolutely terrifying. I am so glad you're on my side. Always, Sophia whispered back. For better or worse, remember? For better or worse. The wedding happened on schedule, in the estate gardens under a canopy of white roses. Sophia's niece scattered petals down the aisle while Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes, and Victor stood as Marcus's best man, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo, but fiercely proud. Daniel and Jennifer were there, along with half the foundation board, and what seemed like every person Marcus had ever done business with who wasn't currently trying to kill him. When Sophia walked down the aisle, Marcus looked at her like she'd hung the moon. And when they exchanged vows, promising to protect each other, support each other, and face whatever came next as partners, Sophia knew that every broken moment, every dark night, every terrifying decision had led her exactly where she needed to be, in the arms of a man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, a man who'd learned to trust her strength instead of trying to shield her from it. A man who'd promised her everything and actually meant it. I love you, Marcus said as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. I love you for saving me, for believing in me, for being brave enough to hide in my car like a crazy person. Sophia laughed, radiant and happy and whole. I love you for letting me, for trusting me, for being the kind of man who learns from his mistakes instead of repeating them. We're going to have an interesting life, aren't we? The most interesting, but at least we'll never be bored. Marcus spun her, dipped her, kissed her until she was breathless and laughing. Around them, their guests cheered and toasted and celebrated a love that had been forged in crisis and tempered in trust. And Sophia, who'd started as a maid with a broken arm and nothing to her name, looked at her husband, her partner, her equal, her home, and knew that some stories didn't need fairy tale endings. Because reality, when you fought for it hard enough, could be better than any fairy tale ever written.